It's December 17th, 2023, and the Houston Texans and Tennessee Titans have been locked in a physical AFC South battle for 4 quarters. The game's tied at 16, with 1 minute 43 left in overtime. But wait, pause it there. I thought you said they were playing the Tennessee Titans. That's not the Tennessee Titans. That's the Houston Oilers. Columbia Blue floods the stadium, the famous colour of Houston's original team. On the jerseys, the sidelines, the end zones, everywhere except on the team that actually plays in Houston. So then why are the Tennessee Titans, a team born in 1999, 800 miles away, wearing the Houston Oilers uniforms against Houston? Welcome to the prettiest, pettiest, and punchiest rivalry in football.
Buddy Ryan, who throws a punch at him. And
it's an all-out war of identity, history, and a central Columbia Blue question that's been packed away in boxes for 27 years. Who really owns the Houston Oilers? As Case Keenum rolls right to find Devin Singletary streaking down the field past the familiar oil derrick logo. To understand why this moment is the perfect combination of 27 years of hatred, nostalgia, and exploding scoreboards, we need to go back. This story isn't just a petty uniform rivalry. It asks questions about what is fundamentally wrong with sports in the modern era. Las Vegas, Arizona, Oakland. So who's right? The city that built the team, or the franchise that owns them? Let's talk about the fight for Columbia Blue and striking oil in the middle of Tennessee.
Whether you live in Houston or Tomball, Piney Point or Morgan's Point, you live in Harris County. It's Houston and then some.
Houston in the 1960s was a city on the rise, with NASA planting its flag in the Bayou City and the Astrodome standing as a futuristic, multi-sport marvel fully equipped with an iconic exploding scoreboard and indoor fireworks. Houston was proving itself as more than just a Texas oil town. And the Oilers? They were supposed to be a football team that matched that ambition. Founded in the 1960s, the Oilers hit the ground running, winning the first 2 AFL championships. But the transition to the NFL in the 1970s was as rough as a wildcatter's first dry well. That's an oil reference. They only won 9 games in 4 seasons. Meanwhile, to the north, the Dallas Cowboys and Roger Staubach were cementing themselves as America's team. The Oilers, they were struggling to be even South Texas's team. By 1975, the Oilers needed a change, and they found it in O.A. Bum Phillips, their cowboy hat-wearing defensive coordinator promoted to head coach and GM. Bum had more than just football acumen. He brought a homegrown Southern charm that Houston could rally behind. On the sideline, he wore his iconic cowboy hat, except at home in the Astrodome, because his mama raised him right not to wear hats indoors. He spoke in folksy wisdom and treated his players like family. Friday nights at Oilers training were less boot camp, more family barbecue, with pizza, beer, card games, and country music, courtesy of Bum's friends in the business. Bum didn't build a team. He built a culture, and Houston was ready for it. The Oilers went 10-4 in Bum's first season, their first winning record in over a decade. He introduced the 4-6 defense, turning linebacker Robert Brazile into a pass-rushing nightmare. And suddenly, the Oilers weren't just the other team in Texas. They were tough, they were different, they were on the rise. But something was missing. They needed a superstar, someone to put Houston on the football map. And that missing piece arrived in 1978. Bum traded up with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the #1 pick and selected Earl Campbell, Heisman-winning running back from Texas. Campbell wasn't just strong, he was Texas strong. With thighs the size of oil barrels and a running style that flattened defenders, Campbell transformed the Oilers overnight. Houston had its hero, and the city fell in love on one night in 1978. November 20th, Monday Night Football, Oilers versus Dolphins. Campbell ran for 199 yards and 4 touchdowns, including an 81-yard stampede that sent the crowd into hysteria. And that night changed something. Whether it was their relatable coach in a cowboy hat, their countrified swagger with the endorsement of Willie Nelson, or the sheer beauty of their jerseys, Luv Ya Blue was born. Fans filled the Astrodome with homemade Luv Ya Blue signs. Columbia Blue jerseys became the city's uniform. The Oilers were the perfect team for Houston, fusing oil boom swagger and country toughness. Such was Campbell's impact in the city that they called them the Houston Oilers. They lost as Bum Phillips lost his hat after a Pittsburgh fan stole it after the game. He got it back. Something incredible happened when they returned home. Bum had promised in the press that the team would return to the Astrodome to greet fans, but when the dejected team landed after the flight was delayed 3 hours, everyone was ready to go home. But Bum said no. I don't care if just one person's there, we gave our word, we're going. There were 50,000 fans waiting at the Astrodome. A losing team getting a championship-worthy homecoming. That is how deep Columbia Blue ran in Houston's veins. Remember Robert Brazil, the linebacker? He said, "You got to understand, the biggest thing in Texas was the oil. Then the second biggest thing was the Cowboys. And then here we come, winning games." And as they did, something strange started to happen. The team became fashion icons. Bum Phillips became a hero, and his ever-present cowboy hat became a bestseller and target for every fan in the league. Because the city saw itself in him. It's honest, southern, a little bit rough around the edges, but unmistakably authentic. Nelson and Earl Campbell, now the face of the team, became style ambassadors for Harold's in the Heights, a local men's store that dressed Houstonians in everything from pearl snap shirts to tailored suits. And Bum's look became so distinct it made national news. The Cincinnati Enquirer even sending a reporter to chronicle his boot collection. But it wasn't just a look. It was a vibe. The Oilers were country, they were tough, and they belonged wholeheartedly to Houston. The alignment of identities between the team and the city was total. A local cowboy hat seller told the Washington Post, "In December, if the Oilers are in the playoffs, we sell 200 hats a day. People buy them to sit in front of their TV and watch the game." As the fans sat down in their bespoke cowboy hats to watch the Oilers that season, they saw Thanksgiving revenge against the Cowboys, and they even beat the Steelers in the regular season. They were ready. Or so they thought. They faced off in the AFC Championship again against the Steelers, and it was closer, but they lost on a controversial call against Mike Renfro. This time, 70,000 fans greeted them at the Astrodome. It was something unheard of. A losing team getting a hero's welcome, not once, but twice. Having lost to the Steelers twice in 2 years, Bum took the mic and released an absolute all-timer.
1 year ago, we knocked on the door. This year, we beat on the door. Next year, we're gonna kick the son of in.
The 1970s Oilers harnessed the spirit of a booming city, but they never betrayed their country roots. The Oilers were Houston, and Houston was all in on the Oilers. But, as any sports fan will tell you, love hurts, and the playoffs turned into an annual cruel tradition for the Oilers fans. After one too many heartbreaks, the honeymoon was over, and the man in the cowboy hat would be riding into the distance.
Then Jeff Fisher had the team come back out, and they actually went around and shook hands with the fans, kind of formed some sort of a bond, which obviously didn't take. I mean, the bonds can be forgotten pretty quickly when the losses start happening.
It's December 6th, 1996, and the Houston Oilers are playing their final game at the Astrodome. And the people of Houston do not care.
Announced attendance here today, 15,131.
How did we get here? Last time we checked, they'd been throwing celebration tailgates for playoff losses, and now it's newspapers at kickoff. The two AFC Championship losses in 78 and 79 were followed by another playoff loss to the Raiders in 1980. The Oilers owner, Bud Adams, fired Bum Phillips on New Year's Eve. It was a gut punch to a city that embraced Bum and his cowboy hat like family. The media speculated that Bud Adams couldn't handle someone else being the face of the franchise, and Houston was starting to agree. The Oilers were theirs, but Bud Adams was the landlord, and an increasingly unpopular one. And what followed was freefall. The team cycled through coaches, failing to find a steady quarterback, and by 1983 they hit rock bottom with a 2-14 record. Houston, once the beating heart of Texas football, was an NFL afterthought. And then came Warren Moon. Signed in 1984 after dominating the CFL, Moon's arrival was seismic. Overlooked by the NFL due to outdated biases against black quarterbacks, he spent 5 years winning Grey Cups in Canada before proving too good to ignore. But while Moon was lighting up the scoreboard, Bud Adams was lighting fuses.
The Houston Astros, however, couldn't care less about winter's nip. They are working out in their new all-weather stadium. The players say the new park bats 1,000, no sun in their eyes, and air-conditioned comfort.
The Oilers' home stadium, the Astrodome, once a technological marvel, was outdated. Sports business had changed. Sports stadiums needed revenue from luxury suites to entertain corporate guests, and the Astrodome had an exploding scoreboard. Dissatisfied with the Oilers' stadium lease where they played second fiddle to the MLB's Astros, he threatened to move the team, entertaining offers from anybody: Jacksonville, San Antonio, Phoenix. Houston coughed up $67 million for stadium renovations, but the cost was the exploding scoreboard, a city landmark, and Houstonians were not happy. But luckily, on the field, the Oilers have found their swagger again. By 1987, they had embraced the pass-heavy, run-and-shoot offense, turning Moon and his receivers Ernest Givins, Hayward Jeffries, Curtis Duncan, and Drew Hill into household names. They became perennial playoff contenders, but again, they just could never get over the hump. And no game encapsulated Houston's heartbreak better than the 1992 wildcard matchup against Buffalo. Leading 35-3 early in the second half, the Oilers somehow lost 41-38 in overtime, the largest blown lead in NFL history. You hear that, Falcons? It was an almost poetic embodiment of Houston football, thrilling, reckless, and ultimately gut-wrenching. By 1993, Bud Adams had reached his breaking point. The NFL's new salary cap meant that the Oilers' win-now spending habits were unsustainable. At training camp, Adams issued a brutal ultimatum to the team: you make the Super Bowl, or you pack your bags. And then, somewhat unsurprisingly, then came the most dysfunctional season in NFL history. Strap in. Adams undermined his own team by hiring defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan without telling head coach Jack Pardee. Ryan mocked the run-and-shoot offense and clashed with OC Kevin Gilbride and even punched him on the sideline during a game. Meanwhile, under the pressure of Bud Adams' ultimatum, Warren Moon crumbled, and the fans were understandably annoyed when Bud Adams criticized lineman David Williams for missing a game to attend the birth of his child. The dysfunction continued with the tragic death of lineman Jeff Arm. Still, the Oilers strung together an 11-game win streak, only to fall again in the playoffs. It was their 7th straight postseason failure. True to his word, Adams dismantled the roster. Moon was traded, Buddy Ryan left, and the feared run-and-shoot offense was reduced to rubble. Without Moon to run it, the offense plummeted to last place in scoring, and the Oilers were all the way back to 2-14.
There's a lot of skepticism here in Houston. I mean, naturally, this game was not televised in Houston. They couldn't sell out the Astrodome, which is not a big stadium.
The final insult, the 1995 NFL Draft. Thanks to expansion teams Carolina and Jacksonville, the Oilers, after all their suffering in a 2-14 season, were bumped down to the 3rd overall pick, where they selected Steve McNair, a future franchise cornerstone. But Bud Adams had already decided that Steve McNair would not be Houston's quarterback. The Oilers were leaving town, and for the first time in history, the Houston fans didn't care.
Adams again today made it clear before leaving Houston that the Astrodome is no longer a suitable playing site for his team under any conditions.
They can't expect me to sit here and go broke.
Bud Adams had gutted the Oilers roster, and Houston was done with him. The Astrodome, once futuristic, was falling apart. A 1995 preseason game was cancelled because the turf was too dangerous. It had become a relic. In 1994, the LA Rams left for St. Louis, landing a new dome and a spike in ticket and merchandise sales. And Adams wanted the same thing. That June, he opened talks with Houston Mayor Bob Lanier about a downtown stadium that could host the Oilers, Astros, Rockets, and even an NHL team. Lanier was open to the idea until the public found out. Just talking to Adams tanked his approval ratings, and with re-election looming, Lanier backed out. By then, Nashville had made its move. Tennessee fast-tracked a stadium deal worth $350 million over 10 years, and all that remained was the public vote. In Houston, there was no last-ditch effort to keep the team, no Cleveland Browns-style campaign to preserve the name and legacy. The relationship was over. Fans had endured years of broken promises and relocation threats. They were exhausted. By 1995, NFL owners approved the move, and Houston football was on life support. The cruel twist: a lease signed by Adams in 1987 meant the Oilers had to play 2 more lame duck seasons in Houston. Fan interest completely collapsed. The Astrodome turned into a ghost town. Home games were blacked out, local radio stations cut away to air Rockets preseason games. A Save the Oilers rally drew 60 people, which brings us all the way back to their final game. 15,000 people showed up to watch them lose to the Bengals. They weren't there to celebrate the Oilers. They were there to bury their team. But Bud Adams had his fresh new start. New city, new stadium, new revenue. There was just one problem. Tennessee didn't want the Oilers either.
The first announcements came in August about the Oilers possibly coming. People said, what in the world? They couldn't hardly believe it. What made you want to come to Tennessee?
You know, the Tennesseans are much like the Texans. Now, I couldn't go to Baltimore, I couldn't go to California, but I should sure come to Tennessee.
So Tennessee finally had the NFL team they always wanted. Sort of. Just like Houston, they didn't want the Oilers. Oilers meant nothing to Tennesseans. They weren't Houston. They had no oil. They wanted their own identity, their own history, not someone else's. But Bud Adams had seen what was happening in Cleveland. The Browns in 1996 moved to Baltimore to become the Ravens, but the city successfully negotiated to keep the rights to the Browns' name, logo, and colors for a new franchise to continue where the old Browns left off. That was too painful for Bud. He decided to keep Columbia Blue and make it work. So with the new Nashville Stadium 2 years away from completion, he tried moving the Oilers to Memphis. But Memphis didn't try back. Memphis had been trying to get its own football team after the original USFL Memphis Showboat, what a name, folded, narrowly losing out to Carolina and Jacksonville just 3 years prior. So the team averaged a league-worst 28,000 fans per game. Meanwhile, the Tennessee Volunteers, powered by young Peyton Manning, were drawing over 100,000 fans. Tennessee already had a football obsession, there it was, but it just wasn't with Bud Adams' team. Nobody wanted the Oilers in Memphis. Memphis wanted their own team. Nashville wasn't about to make the 3.5-hour drive. And Houston despised Bud Adams. The following season, the team packed up again, this time to Vanderbilt Stadium in Nashville. It didn't help. Sensing a crisis, NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue stepped in with a solution. The Oilers' name could be retired permanently, never to be resurrected by another franchise. And so, with the Oilers' IP safely buried, Bud immediately launched a contest to rename the team. The Tennessee Titans were born. Inspired by Nashville's nickname as the Athens of the South, the team took on a name steeped in Greek mythology. And ironically, Titans had once belonged to the New York Jets in their AFL years, an AFL that Bud Adams helped to create. But the Jets didn't mind handing it over, on the understanding that they could still appear as the Titans in throwback games, which they did in 2009 against the Titans. So the Titans became the Oilers and the Jets became the Titans. Anyway, in 1999, the Oilers ceased to exist. The famous oil derrick, gone. Columbia Blue transitioned to Titans Blue. With the assets from their lame duck years in Houston still intact, the Titans hit the ground running. Steve McNair and Eddie George, much like Moon and Campbell and the Houston teams that came before them, spurred the team onto the Music City Miracle and 1 yard short of a Super Bowl title, their first year in Nashville. And from that point on, there was no looking back. And this is where we reach the long, cold winter of the Houston Oilers. Packed away in boxes and ignored for decades, Tennessee wanted its own team. And in the fragile early years of a new franchise, they couldn't afford to dwell on the past. And in the same year the Titans are making their 1 yard short Super Bowl run, the NFL awarded a franchise to Houston. Now, in the design process of Houston's new team, there was no discussion of the Oilers or Columbia Blue. For one, the identity was buried legally by the Titans' ownership and culturally by the NFL's promise to Bud Adams. But even the Houston fans wanted a fresh start.
The only thing undecided now is what to call the new team.
Something good, something nice, different than the Oilers.
That's the only thing that we are sure of at this point. The NFL says the new team will not be called the Oilers.
Newspapers from the time are littered with quotes by Texan fans drawing a line under the painful Oilers exit 6 years prior. Houston had moved on. Years of Bud Adams turning himself into persona non grata with relocation threats and taxpayer extortion over the crumbling Astrodome had taken its toll. As a cruel twist of fate, the football gods decided to realign the NFL with Houston's entry, placing Tennessee and Houston in the same division, the AFC South, slated to play each other twice a year from now until the rapture. Both Tennessee and Houston moved forward into their new identities, and the Columbia Blue crypt was sealed. Unwanted by fans in both Houston and Tennessee, the Oilers' legacy was buried right up until 2022, when the NFL changed its one helmet policy. And then, the question of who actually owned the Oilers' history bubbled up out of the ground, like, well, I mean, you can guess.
Just wonder how they're even in this position to win.
And so, here we are. December 17th, 2023. Case Keenum, Houston hero, orchestrating a late game drive to set up the Texans for a field goal. On the other sideline, the Tennessee Titans dressed head to toe in Columbia blue, parading as the Houston Oilers at their own self-thrown party. You couldn't script it better. Because in recent years, despite the lukewarm rivalry between the two fairly young franchises, the bad blood continued to simmer, especially in the boardrooms. On the field, sure, there were flare-ups. Andre Johnson and Cortland Finnegan's iconic brawl comes to mind, but it never really felt like a real rivalry. The Oilers were gone. Everyone had moved on. Or so we thought. The Titans cracked open the crypt in 2009 for the AFL anniversary games, debuting the original Oilers throwback, complete with a blue helmet and white oil derrick. And then in 2022, the NFL finally relaxed its one helmet rule, and just like that, Pandora's locker popped open. The Titans wasted no time. They announced the Oilers throwbacks in return against the Falcons, and most notably, against the Houston Texans. Houston erupted. Texans legend JJ Watt voiced the collective disgust of a fan base who'd long ignored the Oilers, until now. Meanwhile, the University of Houston reclaimed the history by donning H-Town uniforms drenched in Oilers-esque Columbia blue for their 2023 season opener. Who played for them? Oh yeah, that's right, Case Keenum. Cool. The NFL's response? Straight up cease and desist. Roger Goodell honoring the promise made by his predecessor to Bud Adams. No team will ever lay claim to the Oilers' identity in the NFL or NCAA. The law was clear. The trademarks, word marks, jerseys and logos belong to the Tennessee Titans. But the history, that's a little bit trickier. Let me explain it to you with Michael Jackson. Bear with me. In 1985, Michael Jackson bought the entire publishing rights to the Beatles' back catalogue. Every note, every lyric, all the merchandising rights. That doesn't mean Michael Jackson was in the Beatles. Look, Houston didn't fight for the Oilers when they left in 1996. They didn't clamour for their history when the Texans came on the scene in 2002. And the Titans? They left those Oilers uniforms in a storage unit for 20 years. Nobody's innocent here. Instead, we're left with something not quite black and white. Maybe shades of blue. That colour, so synonymous with Houston's boom years, represented more than a football team. It stood for a city stepping out of Dallas's shadow. It meant Bum Phillips, Earl Campbell, Dan Pastorini, Billy Whiteshoes Johnson. And the Titans have made strides to honour those legends, with several Oilers heroes going into the Titans' Ring of Honor. And those players are the real victims here, as Tennessee and Houston both turned their backs on the Oilers, and with the Astrodome gathering dust, the Oilers legends had nowhere to call home. But we need to decide what sports is actually about. Is it about revenue streams and legal agreements? Or is it about people, communities, culture? The Raiders in Vegas, the A's packing for, well, Vegas. Because what matters most in sports isn't the trademarks or the TV rights. It's the Sundays on the couch with your dad. It's your grandma screaming as the kick is good. Or the old jersey in the back of your closet, the memories you didn't know you were making until the team packed up and left town. The Columbia blue of the Oilers represents more than just a football team. It embodies a significant period in Houston's history and identity, a connection that legal ownership in Tennessee cannot erase. But it's a custody battle with no clean winner. Both sides fumbled the inheritance. The Titans ignored the Oilers for 20 years, and Houston didn't want them back until Tennessee had them. But still, when Case Keenum led that final drive, it felt like something shifted. It wasn't just a game-winning field goal. It was cultural revenge, a moment where a city's past rose up, dusted itself off, and reminded the league who built this team. And 1 year later, the Texans debuted a new H-Down Color Rush jersey, with a familiar blue hue accenting the numbers and logo. Turns out you can't copyright a color. And Houston, taking the lead from its university, fired another round in the battle for the Houston Oilers. Because they couldn't get the name. But that color looks good back in Houston. Breaking news, what's up? Thank you so much for watching the video. I'm in the middle of a house move at the moment. Something crazy is about to happen, and it's all because of you guys, because you guys watch these videos and you really appreciate them, and it's been crazy that I started making these behind my desk. And now I'm flying out to America to make the next two. So there might be a little bit of quiet on the channel for a little bit, but I'm going to be very loud on Instagram. So if you enjoy the videos, then come and join me on the Instagram and keep up with what's about to happen next, because it's about to go doosh, which is great. Anyway, thank you for watching the video, and I will speak to you soon. Peace.